Okay, we're starting part 3 of my interview with Lee Morrison. Basically, I'm calling this the finishing school for violence. And Lee has delivered, definitely. Before we get into that, though, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bells, make sure that you share this channel with people and so we can continue to grow. I've been getting amazing feedback from this particular episodes that we've had with Lee, and I appreciate all the comments. So make sure if you liked it that much that you're sharing it with other people. Also, make sure that you guys get over to surviveviolence.com. This is where you can join the free masterclass. If you like the content on here, we can be a lot more explicit when you join the masterclass. Have to be a little bit more regulated here on YouTube, but we can be completely straightforward with you, and we can talk bluntly with you at the masterclass. So please take advantage of that. Also keeps you in contact with us. You will get all the latest information on any events that are happening, any of the subject matter experts are putting out. It's just the best way to get the most relevant information on your self-protection. So surviveviolence.com. All right. Getting back into part 3 of my 3. Nope. There we go. So far, Lee has taken us through his journey of how he came up and his relationship with violence, his background, the fact that he worked the doors of some very seedy nightclubs, had to put a lot of hands on people. He had gang affiliations growing up, both the sports gangs, the football hooliganism, as well as real street gangs of London. He comes from Southeast London, very, very rough part of London, especially during the times he grew up. I will say the people that I have run into from South London during those times, I've actually trained a lot of people when I used to be over there. And the ethos that he's talking about, especially during his era, they did have their own kind of gangster rules. Innocents wouldn't be hit. There's a lot of that stuff that doesn't really exist today. I found most of these guys to be very straight up. If they tell you they're going to do something, they'll do it. They are who they are. Now, Lee is not a gangster, but he understands that world, and he also has that ethos. You can tell he really wants to help people. I understand some of you guys, even though I warned you, some of you guys are upset with some of the language. Get over it. It's not going to be pretty. Violence isn't pretty, and some of the best sources are going to be straightforward and very rough around the edges. And I appreciate it. I really do. This was a great interview. Now we're going to take it from where he was talking about if you are going to operate like a tier 1 civilian, and he's saying highly trained person, he's laid that out, what that means. He's now talking about how do you conduct yourself, in your daily, going about your day, and how do you stay switched on, and what does switched on mean in this technological world that we're in. His conclusions at the end, some people might have some problems with. I tend to agree with him. I think we've made a systemic change in the last year on the way people respond to threats, the way the government responds to threats, and I think we just have to take it all into account when we're there. So again, before we get into the interview, please, it's urbancombatives.com. If you look up Lee Morrison, you'll get her. He has tons of content. Great online program. He also has many, many products, books. The guy's prolific, and definitely, I think you guys can see it's worth having his stuff in your library if you don't have it yet. And if you get a chance to train with him live, I would jump at it. With that said, let's get into the third part of this interview.
Just be one way. The other would be, don't be switched off. If you if you're a tier 1 civilian and you find yourself in an altercation where you're a cornered animal, you did something wrong. You should have said pre-tells. That's why, I laugh when I see these classes and they say, okay, today we're dealing with a knife is to the side of the neck. And now we're going to go, right? Well, What's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is, how did that dynamic happen? It's not fucking Star Trek. He didn't just materialize around my fucking neck. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end. Why am I taking part at the end? Where's the beginning and the middle? And what would the beginning and the middle have been? Well, this person, first of all, has to come into my line of view, has to see me. Now he has to assess whether or not I'm a good target. There's a good chance as he's walking towards me, he's displaying other three pre-threat cue behaviors. He's looking around, head's on a swivel. Maybe he reaches inside of his pocket, so he obscures his hand, accesses the weapon. It's all pre-threat intel. And when he actually looks around for the final time, closing about 10 feet from me, he'll walk with purposeful intent, and now he puts the knife. Well, my question to you would be, where was your fucking attention to the environment when all that shit was going on? Why are you taking part in condition white when now it's just here? And of course, what sort of emotional response will that induce? Imagine, you've got no intel whatsoever. So it's almost like, imagine you're in an elevator on your own in a Las Vegas hotel. You're a switched on individual. You look fucking foreboding. You look like you can handle yourself. And you're pretty confident that no one else is in the room. And now all of a sudden, somebody materialized up against you with a blade. Well, I'll put it to you that even you would get fucking adrenal dump. You would be like, whoa, what the fuck?
Yeah, of course.
Well, in that adrenal-induced state, you are no longer cognitive, which means you can't think logically and make tactical decisions. You are now limbic brain, which means you are acting off pure feeling, which at this moment is the fight-flight feeling, and you are momentarily frozen and you could capitulate. So what they don't take into account when somebody's just been caught this way is how they will feel. So it's outrageous that that could happen without you seeing it. And then they don't take into account how you'd feel. And now expect you to do some fine motor skill or complex motor movement in order to deal with the same. Well, I put it to you that fucker's never been there. Yeah. Because that wouldn't come out. That's why you get a lot of shit sold as self-defense. But, I digress. But if you've got good awareness in place, if you understand that we have resources as people, we have resources and we have options. So our resources are, first of all, my awareness, my radar. Next would be the confident body language profile that I cultivate. So I'm the grey man, I look to blend in, but I will walk with a brisk pace, confident gait, straight spine. I'm not frightened to make eye contact. I'm not frightened to walk into the room and speak to the whole room. And what does that say? It says I'm confident in my own skin. That will in itself make me much less likely to be selected as a victim of assault in the first place. From there, the next resource I have is instincts. Well, as a street kid, trust me, I have instincts. My instincts tell me to turn left, I'm turning fucking left. And they've never failed me. And at the start of all this ridiculousness, when all this bullshit scandemic came to light, I knew instinctively, because I know when I'm being had, and we're being had. But I digress. Instincts is a resource, God-given, right? Whatever your God is. Given to us by source, without doubt. Next would be verbal dissuasion, having the ability to communicate and verbally de-escalate. Because we both know that there's two types of people that you might get into a situation that starts via a verbal engagement. You've got the bad guy that's fucking got an agenda and he intends to fucking do what he's doing, in which case verbal dissuasion isn't going to work. He's got an agenda. And you've also got the normally good guy having a fucking bad day because he's having a shit day and you just made eye contact with him and he's like, what the fuck are you looking at?
Right.
Well, I can de-escalate that person that's having a bad day as long as I'm confident in my own skin and I understand, mate, I'm sorry, look, if you're having a bad day, it's not my fault. If you want to talk about it, I'll help you out. If not, I'd rather go on my way, all right? That's what I'm likely to say. And a good guy would normally, I'm sorry, mate, I'm so embarrassed, I was just having a shit day. It's because it's human. We've all done that. So whether de-escalation is a resource, it can work. Another resource is posturing. So maybe in a physical sense, you posture physically. You fucking touch me, I'll touch you, cunt. Now fuck off, or you still got the legs to carry her as you're walking backwards. Previously, he's assessed my demeanor with his interviewers, plausible victim, and now when I show him I'm a bigger animal with a bit of teeth than him, as I'm moving away, I'm not using posturing to incite the violence. Come on, let's have it. I'm moving away. Stay the fuck away from me, or suggestion of consequence as I extract myself. Now, if nothing else, if I created 15 feet, I can run.
Right.
So posturing is a resource. So you've got awareness, you've got confident body language profile, you've got your voice, which you can use to verbally de-escalate, and you've got posturing. Next thing would be physical tools. Well, that's because that's failed, and now I've got the weapons that God gave me, right? So I've got multi-tool, 2 of them, in fact, 4 of them, in fact. From my point of my fingertips to my elbow is a multi-tool weapon. From the point of my knee to the point of my boot is a multi-tool weapon. So I've got 2 and 2. And what will drive it is this mentality. Oh, yeah, and I've got a mouthful of teeth, which I'll use. So I've got those physical resources, but look at all the other things that I could have implemented before that would have left to me no physical contact. That's what real self-protection is all about. And those resources create options. First option I have is escape. Well, you've got no business getting violent with anyone if you've got the opportunity to escape. But there'll be situations when you might not be able to. So maybe I'm in a vehicle in transit. Maybe I'm in a lift in transit. Maybe I'm with my 350-pound fucking grandmother in a wheelchair and she can't run and I can't leave the bitch. You know, any number of things why I can't immediately extract myself, but escape would be my first option. Next would be verbal dissuasion. Like I said, verbal dissuasion will work on the good guy having a bad day, but it won't work if he's got an agenda. It also won't work if there's a language barrier and he doesn't understand you, or you're in an environment that's extremely loud and he can't hear you. But it's still an option nonetheless. Next might be partial submission. So partial submission is basically the use of deception. So partial submission might be, he goes, give me your wallet and I'll throw it on the floor and I back up. Partial submission. Or partial submission might be for a woman where this guy who's fucking overzealous, he's at a business party, a work party. Normally this guy, Johnny, is a lovely bloke, but he's had lots of alcohol at a Christmas party and now he's the fucking Antichrist and I'm in the kitchen on my own with him. And now imagine he's coming forward going, no, I know you've always liked me. Well, actually, Johnny, I don't like you. And he goes, what do you mean you don't like me? Now he gets all aggressive and fucking imposes his will on the poor female stood there. Well, if she does anything now to try in a physical sense to try and stop him, he'll just slap her, beat her down, show her who's boss. So she may need to create a situation to where she could do that. So maybe she looks around and she undoes a plot and she goes, okay, look, but Johnny, we don't have very long. Right? Be nice, be gentle. I like gentle. Now she starts to undo his belt and then wham, she drives her fucking knee straight into his ball line. Well, she strokes his face and then she gouges his fucking eye. This would be an example of a deceptive partial submission where I'm pretending to play along and I'm winning you over and now I put myself in a better situation to attack. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So that would be a resource that you have, or an option that you have, partial submission, if you like. And next would be, like I said, posturing, and then finally would be fighting back. And if it's got to the point where you've got to fight back, well, you've got to fight till there's nothing left to fight about. And that comes from the willingness. You know, I lay my life at your feet. You know, whatever. What happens, happens. It's all been written. You know, already been written. And I'll do everything I can, everything it takes, anything it takes to prevail, to win. And if I don't win, I'll be the best, fucking second best you've ever seen. You will tell your grandkids about me. And that's it, basically.
Hey, I got one last thing that I'd like to, it's kind of tangential, but I think it's important in this day and age. You grew up with a single mom and you came in and you found, you know, you found the street gang, you found martial arts, and you found the door when you came in. And I would assert those are 3 areas of, for lack of a better word, mentorship that young men are going to seek out.
The martial arts, certainly the martial method. If I could lower it down to one thing that would put me on, kept me on a path, because I come to that crossroads where, you know, I could have become fucking highly successful fucking nefarious criminal without a doubt. Right. Instead of that, I put that energy into helping others. And it was weird the way that happened because I always see myself, I'm still a student. You know, I'm just a student. And I didn't want to be an instructor. So initially when I was doing the doors and I had a similar crew, we hired up a hall where we wanted to pressure test shit. And I said, look, I'm honest. I'll give you all the things I know, but all I'm looking for is a meat puppet. Right. And the way we train, you sign a waiver, you know, fucking non-compliance, spontaneity. You know, we build it up incremental as an inoculation to the stress levels that we were reaching, but I want to test it full on. You know what I'm saying? And I like-minded people. And then they would bring 1 or 2 other people. Before you know it, 3, 6 become 15. And now I'm thinking, fuck, I better teach some kind of, better formulate some kind of curriculum, because a lot of these guys haven't got any skills. So it went back to training hard skills and developing. And you see become developed. And then I started teaching a class. But how it really worked is, because in the UK back in the 90s, as I was developing this, we were truly blessed in a reality-based self-protection sense, because we had everybody. So we had Jeff Thompson, Dave Turton, Kevin O'Hagan. We had so many great instructors in the UK, Dennis Martin. Anyway, I go and train with all of them. And I would also go abroad to train. And I always wanted to train. And wherever I ended up training, for some reason, I just become the star student, if you like. I really didn't want it, but I become the one that they recognize my attributes, you know, on a physical level. So I'm known for being immediate and explosive. Even at 53, I can still fucking do it. And instantaneously aggressive, like I talk about, but very controlled, on, off. And that kind of attracted certain things. And I become instructors on the CQB services, on the Dennis Martin. And before I knew it, I was going to seminars to train, and I ended up teaching. And I found that I couldn't do both. I either teach or I train. And then all of a sudden I got exposure. So many people give me exposure. And I started the seminar circuit, and then it just started to boom from there. And then there was the crossroads for me, because the people that I wanted to teach were the likes of me growing up. I wanted kids that were like me then to know this stuff. So I started to work with women. I worked with domestic violence units, rape crisis centers for free. I would work young offenders centers to try and work with kids, and lots of shit like that. And then I've become full on the civilian self-protection circuit. And then I started teaching CLOPs, so I taught the Met, Grantham Manchester Police. Then I started teaching police units abroad, and then I started working with military, and I worked right up to tier 1 level in the US and elsewhere with military units. So I've taught, because Combatis has the means to adapt for any rules of engagement. So like I was saying before about the vital pyramid, you had the mindset and then the tactics, which in the case would be proactive and be switched on so you can avoid an escape. But then you'd have skills, and skills would be whatever skill you learn. And then finally, kit. So kit would relate to anything that will give you an upper hand. But the example of when I was teaching the Metropolitan Police was a good example of kit orientated, no mindset.
Right.
So I was teaching them that, and they're given all this kit. And although there's CO19, which is the firearms unit, not all cops in the UK carry guns. Not yet, anyway. Right? So what the normal street cop would have would be stiff cuffs, expandable baton, some kind of chemical irritant spray, maybe a taser. Right? And I was working on hypothetical, we were working weapon retention. So we try to take your tool. And we were also working various scenarios. So I said, like, got a scenario. You're called to a park, London Park. This guy's off his head on crack cocaine. His hands are in his pockets. He's swaying forward. He's very unpredictable. And somebody said earlier that they saw him with a knife. You've got to go up and take care of him. So he goes up. Police. So first of all, they might use contact and cover to stay a good distance. There'd be someone making contact, and there'd be cover around the side, right? Like we'd work indoors, contact and cover. And I would say to him, what would you say? He said, well, because I know that I'm aware that there's a presence of hidden hands, I would demand he shows me his hand. I said, good start. He says, fuck you, copper, I ain't showing you shit. What you going to do? What you do now? He goes, well, I would pull my spray and I would train it on the subject. I went, good. Then what? He goes, I tell him to drop the weapon. He ain't dropping the weapon. Well, I would announce spray, and then I would spray. I go, what the fuck would you announce? You're going to spray him. He goes, oh, we have to. Legislation says we must. But if you fucking spray him and you're telling him you're going to spray him, he's going to turn, he's going to fucking move away, it's going to fail. He goes, well, I've got to do it. Well, he's got a knife. He goes, I've got to do it. All right. I said, so your tool, spray, misses, or it blows back, or it just fails. It doesn't work. Now what? He goes, well, I would transition my spray back into my belt and go to my baton. I went, would you? Would you really? He goes, how far is this subject from you? He went 3 feet. I goes, you've just sprayed him in the face with a chemical irritant. He's already off his head. He's agitated and he's violent. How long do you think it's going to take him to close that distance aggressively after you've shot him and you sprayed him in the eyes? Do you think you're going to have time? And he went, well, what should I do then? I went, well, what have you got in your hand? He went, failed CS gas. I went, no, what have you got in your hand? He went, failed CS gas. I went, what does it feel like? He went, hard. I went, of course it's hard. It's a fucking can. Hit him in the fucking head with it. It's an impact weapon. Branch. He went, oh yeah. Oh no, I couldn't hit him in the head. I went, well, all right, fucking zone off and hit him in the collarbone, but use that. Now, there's an example now of kit orientated, no mindset. Because do you think I'd have to tell the criminal if that failed to hit him with it? The people in my day, particularly that used to get their hands on CS gas with football crowd, they would spray the whole thing in your face and then beat the granny out you with the can. Why? Because they could. So there's the shift. The criminal mentality and the cop mentality. There's a fucking huge disparity that you won't equalise with kit.
Right.
So it all comes back to the same thing, mindset. So that's why I introduced them to this Lofty Wiseman, John Lofty Wiseman's vital pyramid, which is mindset, get that right. Tactics, get the correct ideas going. Skills, get trained. And now kit's the cherry on the cake. And because this was designed for a tier 1 unit, such as DevGru, imagine this. Mindset's in place because they've got through selection, right? Everybody knows these are crazy motherfuckers and they're willing, right? Tactics, well, they're trained in the best fucking warfare tactics that you can think of. Skills, well, they're skills in a myriad of things. They're just off the scale. The way these people have the capacity to absorb and implement and model what they've seen is outstanding as part of their selection. So they've got skills. And now, as the cherry on the cake, they've got the best comms, the best night vision, the best carbine, the best pistol, the best this, the best armor, the best that. Now kit's the cherry on the cake and makes the ultimate warrior, which is how it was designed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, solid. So
that's what the vital pyramid's about. But that applies, that model, mindset, willingness, tactics, well, you've got an idea of what to do should you see a shady situation. Skills, yeah, you've done some training. Kit, yeah, you carry the odd thing that you're going to find useful. Well, that apply right down to a security operative, to any level of a cop, to any level of a civilian, particularly a tier 1 civilian, to even a housewife. That dynamic applies, that model for self-protection applies. Mindset, most important ingredient. Then learn from a tactical point of view how to operate. Now you get the skills and then supplement that with whatever kit works. Whereas the martial arts is 99% skill-based. There's not even 1% to address the emotional component. Whereas combat sport is much better. It's about 60-40. 60% is focused on good stand-up skills, good ground skills, good strategy, your way of fighting, offensive, counter-offensive, whatever the fighter you are. Good understanding discipline, good analysis, good athlete, very conditioned, very fit, 60% physical. The other 40% would be a mental component. So they're going to know who they're going to fight on the day, blah, blah, blah. So they will watch his weaknesses, watch his skills. They will visualize in their head fighting against the fighter they're going to fight. They will picture in their head routines for positive emotional thinking. And so that they focus on what they're going to do, not what the other guy's going to do. So there's an emotional component. It's about 60-40 in MMA or UFC. But the street's different. It's 90% emotional. 10% skill. The majority of street criminals that I grew up with didn't have a modicum of the fucking skill set that majority of self-protection students had. They had 3 things. They had fucking mentality. So the what they did in a physical sense was always very simple. Just hit you repeatedly in the head with a house brick. Just stab you, grab you, stab you repeatedly. Just sucker punch you from the side, grab you, kick your fucking face off repeatedly. Very gross motor action. But what they did was simple. It was always brutal. Absolutely brutal. Take it much further than the average citizen would. Wouldn't know when to stop. And it was always emotionally rooted. They'd attack you or assault you with hurt and hate. And that's the difference that makes the fucking difference. No amount of kit or skill sets or certificates or belts is going to equal that disparity. You understand? I am primarily a benevolent soul, really. But I've been touched by malevolence. And that's what makes me capable. And my whole goal in life has always been to give that to others. And I always say the same thing in my seminars, right? I don't teach students how not to be victims. I don't do that. I teach my students how to be predatory, how to be the biggest fucking predator in the room, and how to believe that you are. And regardless of whether that's true or not, doesn't matter a fuck. As long as you believe it to be true, it's operational. So I teach my people be predatory. And of course, they think that's negative, but it's not negative because they have that ability and skill to implement in order to save their life or the life of those they love so that they may go on. And that's where it belongs. It doesn't belong anywhere else. Doesn't belong in retribution, doesn't belong in robbing somebody, doesn't belong in teaching somebody something. If you took two identical videos, you took a nefarious criminal beating somebody and robbing them, the actual actions that you'd see would look brutal on CCTV, even with no audio. Oh, brutal, repugnant, because the violence is ugly. Conversely, if you saw one of my students protecting himself against that said nasty, nefarious criminal, you would see him hit him, fucking repeatedly hit him until he's down and make sure he doesn't get up. And that would look equally ugly and horrible because violence is ugly. So the two videos would look identical. But what's the difference? Reason. This person robbed him because he forgot his medication, because he needs to get his next fix, because he's a nasty cunt who just likes to fucking hurt people. This person fought out of an act of sheer desperation because he was a cornered animal and he needed to get back to his wife and kids because he loves them and he needs them. See the difference? It all comes down to why you do it. And like I say, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Well, there's very few places in the world you can go for that. And so I'm really hoping this is going to help expose a lot of people that need this approach to you, because I've never seen a time, I don't know where you're at with this, but I've never seen a time where young men are just so devoid of any skill sets like this. And nobody's introduced them to it. I had the fortunate ability of growing up.
Pacified. It's all part of the plan, mate.
Yeah. I grew up on military bases. And so I had great role models all the way through. And I was very, very lucky. I thought that was the norm until, I really started getting outside of the military and starting to teach civilians. I realized it's not the norm. And it's really, really needed right now because men really are having a hard time navigating waters these days. And your approach is absolutely spot on. I mean, listen, the physical skill sets are the physical skill sets. Those are excellent, but they're really not of much use without the whole context that you've just discussed during this whole interview. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Well, like I say, that's my goal here. I honestly believe everything's for a reason. And there's many things in my life that I'm not good at, right? Marriage, relationships, situations like that. Maybe early days in my life being a dad, and maybe I wasn't the most attentive. In order to make yourself successful at anything, you had to a degree be selfish. Lots of things. Business is another example of shit, of stuff that I've not been necessarily good at. But this shit I know. I feel like I was born to give this shit to other people. And in fact, sometimes I can present it that knowingly that I almost feel that something is operating through me. It's not me. Yeah. I feel like I was here to give this message to other people, to help other people. And it's almost something acting through me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think listen, you can't fake the authenticity of it. And that is probably the one thing that comes across, huge right now in this, and people will get it. I mean, you're gonna get some, decent response from this, I'm sure. I heard in another interview that you were working on a book. Are you still working on? Are you any closer?
Yeah. I mean, basically, I intend to leave this business with my very candid autobiography. And I mean, I've had 25 published books in relation to self-protection and combative, right. But this is an autobiography. And basically it's pathway to the peaceful warrior. And of course, I'm still on the journey. I'm not at the summit, but I have had, at the beginning of this situation with this current world event, I immediately knew that it was a scam. And so they talk about the Great Awakening. They talk about the Great Awakening in the sense of people realizing that this is a scam and others not. So that's one facet of waking up, if you like. But the other part of my Great Awakening for me was more spiritual. I just felt something ascended me. And I've got another channel, Path to the Peaceful Warrior, which people can look at. And there's plenty of other interviews that I've done that talk about this. I've already gone on enough, so I won't go on about it. You can find it up there. But basically, I feel that we are all part of something so much more than what this 3D matrix has led us to believe. And that there are certain souls here right now to help wake up others. And if not wake them up with what's coming, the realization that, you know, everything you've ever known is a fucking lie. Many people will struggle in an emotional sense to deal with that. And I believe that there are many people here, call them light workers, call them what you like, that are here to help enlighten others in some way, shape or form. And I believe that my vehicle for that just happens to be this. Because without what's going on in terms of waking up to you being had, this has ascended consciousness in many people. As there's so many young people that come to me, young lads that struggled with, with confidence, with ego, with getting into problems, may have had drug problems, may have had other problems. And I've turned them into real decent men, real decent human beings that are aware that they're capable and now can throw the monkey off the back and just live life and love who they're around. They know what they're capable of now, so they don't need to be as they were before, which only really come from a lack of confidence. So I extended the consciousness of many people within UC by that alone. But at this time that we find ourselves is a unique time in history. I honestly believe that there's certain people here to help shed some light on what's really dark, because there's some dark souls out there and some dark entities that are, creating a very nefarious atmosphere. And conversely, there's light workers, there's light people. But I believe that if you use the analogy of somebody that's dark and somebody that's light, if you've got somebody that's primarily benevolent but knows malevolence because they've been touched by it, then they're no longer white. They're more of a grey warrior, if that makes sense. And I've always believed I am a grey warrior because my whole life has been dedicated to the perfection of violence, which is the dark arts. But it's what I use them for that sheds light back. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it allows you to live that great life because that's no longer the monkey you're worried about.
I know why I live it, to give it to others because you need it. So, like, to me, an evil soul will hurt and hate and fight and kill for what he hates stood in front of him. I will only fight and stand and plausibly take life if I have to for those that I love stood behind me. There has to be someone that stands up for what you love, because you can be very pacified, being very, light and warm and kind and loving, and love is the way. But you can become very victimized by nefarious energies because you don't have the capability possibly to stand up against dark. That's where you need somebody like, the persona I'm talking about, which is primarily benevolent but knows the fucking dark and is willing to stand and face it should it need to, in order to protect what he loves. That's where it belongs for me, and I want to give it to people so that they could do the same.
Yeah, I think
that's my destiny.
Well, yeah, I think I would encourage people to catch you now, where you're at because of what you've been able to get it to. And I get it. Yeah, it's so funny. I'm talking to other people kind of in the industry that I respect, and a lot of the guys are getting to this point to where it's like they're pretty much ready to not necessarily hang it up, but they want to make a transition. And I think it would be excellent for them to get a hold of you right now and get this, because what you've just described is you've got this life's work that's really come to everything you just presented is just so tight and well thought out that you're at your apex here, or getting close. Let's put it that way.
I hope so.
Hey, well, I really appreciate the interview. I will make sure people have all the contact information. But just before we stop the interview, is there any last thing you want to share with the audience, or any especially, it can be about current states or whatever, or what's really a lot of people are looking at this channel and they're being introduced to these people and these concepts for the first time. You know, I think the problem is a lot of people are scared to take that first step. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Right, I'll close with this. So the current situation is designed to keep everybody in that fight or flight, fearful state. That's what they want. So I would say turn off the fucking TV and turn off mainstream media and don't listen, because you're being fed constant narrative that keeps you in that fight or flight response, whether you know it or not. Now, the fight or flight response belongs in the conscious mind during an emergency. So if there's suddenly an emergency, I need fight or flight response and adrenaline because it's God's gift to make me capable of dealing with said problem. But that's not where the fight or flight response lives, conscious mind. It lives in the subconscious mind. It's idle. So when you're not aware of your thoughts. So we have 65,000 thoughts a day. How many of those are you aware of? You know, a majority of those are subconscious thinking. Now that subconscious thinking is being programmed by the current narrative to keep you in a fight or flight response. I'm worried about this. If I get this disease, I wonder if I have the vaccination, will I be able to travel? I wonder if this, I wonder if that. Constant. And that's not where we belong. We don't belong in a fight or flight response. We belong in natural homeostasis state, which is feed or breed. It's a fact. There ain't a single human organism on the planet that can sustain life for a significant period of time in the sympathetic nervous system, in fight or flight. We need to be parasympathetic. We need to be in homeostasis where we're cool, but we're being constantly bombarded. We're waking up with thoughts of dread, going to sleep with thoughts of dread, having the thoughts of dread in the middle of the night. It's just constant. And what that does is it wears out your immune system. Because like I said, there ain't a single organism on the planet that can sustain fight or flight response indefinitely, because it destroys your immune system. And when it destroys your immune system, you're susceptible to the very next cold that comes along. Hence, it becomes a fulfilling prophecy that you've caught this so-called bogus disease. And it's all part of a fucking plan. My advice would be, right, strive to be in the now, because all that matters is this moment and now. In fact, all you've got is now and the moment that follows it and what follows that. So don't waste now worrying about the past that you can't change. And don't waste now continuously fretting about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, the future. Because now's not here and the past is gone, so all you've got is now. And if you actually just stop, take a breath, look around you, in this particular moment of now, I'm actually very comfortable where I'm sat. I'm enjoying a stimulating conversation with somebody very interesting also. I'm sat here comfortable. I'm under no threat. There's no problem. I've got my lovely wife in there. I've got my beautiful dog over there. I'm just about to have something tantalizingly nice to eat. The moment of now, right now, is good. So enjoy your moments of now. Because, you know, like I said, the fight or flight response lives in the subconscious brain, which keeps you constantly fucking worrying about shit, not in the now. Whereas now I'm cool. If an emergency comes along, I'll be alerted to it. It'll come into my conscious brain where fight or flight then belongs. But right now, excuse me. Thank you. But right now, I'm pretty good. So I would say get out in nature, find a connection with nature, take your shoes off, walk through nature, walk on a beach, go to a nice area where you're out in nature. For some reason, the organicness of nature allows you to find that present moment. And, you know, really, I also highly recommend Eckhart Tolle. You read the book, Power of Now. And he talks about what I just said. None of this shit comes from me, you know. We all have concepts about how we should be, but there's so much more to us than just this physical self. You know, there's many other bodies to us. You know, there's an emotional body, there's a spiritual body, there's an etheric body, there's a mental body, as well as the physical body. We have an aura that you can't see, and all of those things need to be nourished. And what seems to nourish them most is nature. So get out in nature, I would say. Also, learn how to meditate. By meditating it, you find that moment and now. And I've been doing it since all of this shit's been going on. I only played with meditation as growing up, but I've been meditating near enough every day. And I find that peaceful essence moment of now. And it's great. And what it allows me to do is this. Before, there'd be stimuli, reaction. Not necessarily a knee-jerk reaction, but reaction. But what pausing, recognizing moments of now and using meditation has allowed, now I get stimuli, pause, assess, respond. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
It allows me to observe everything without any resistance or any judgment before I decide on what to do. And I think right now that's critical. So I say, get out of nature, find that oneness of yourself, that moment. People are too busy doing. You need to get busy being. Make sense?
That's outstanding. I think it's the perfect place to stop it, man.
Okay, cool.
So some of you probably heard the last part of that where you started talking about learning to meditate, being out in nature, doing all that stuff, the fact that there's more than the physical self. And you're like, yeah, whatever. I know. When I was 20, I was like that too. I will tell you what's very interesting, what's very consistent. Those in the military, law enforcement, people like Lee, who really have, dealt with violence. It's interesting we come full circle at the end, and kind of like the old samurai, realizing other skill sets are very important. I know some of you are still in the physical. Some of you are still all about, learning this. I hope this interview showed you how important your mindset is and that you have to make that decision. What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to put your life on the line for? What is unacceptable to you? You have to clearly think about that. We talk about that oftentimes, especially in my live trainings. We talk about, you need to make that decision well ahead of time. And without that foundation of the right mindset, you'll be building a house on a really weak foundation. So don't underestimate that. I hope you also heard how he talked about those criminal aspects of his friends that were criminals, who didn't have the skill sets that the highly trained martial artists had or the fighters or the bouncers had, but they understood human nature. They understood how to take advantage of it. They did very simple things that worked very well. So the other thing is, if you're having some excuse thinking you have to be some athletic phenom to be able to protect yourself, I will tell you that in my 30 plus years of teaching this, having to use it, every time I've had to use something, it's been really disappointing. It's been a very base level strike or base level joint break that beginners learn. So it's never been any of the fancy stuff. It's never been any of the really, cool shit that we all practice. So take into account what Lee did. This 3-part interview, I think, was outstanding. I've had some really great people on. I've got some more great people coming up. But I want to give you all these different voices. But I hope you're starting to see, there are principles that are kind of universal. And that if somebody really understands violence, they're going to expose you to them. And they're uncomfortable truths, but absolutely necessary, So I hope you enjoyed this. Listen, please keep sharing the channel. I know I keep saying also, get to Survive Violence. Sign up for it. If you haven't signed up for it, just sign up for it. Even if you're not going to go through the masterclass, which I don't know why you wouldn't, it will keep you on our email list. It'll make sure that, should we ever get deplatformed or anything like that, we'll still be able to keep in contact with you and tell you where you can get our content. It's extremely important. But I appreciate all of the comments that I've been getting on this particular interview, and I hope you found it as entertaining as I did and as informative as I did. It's really funny. I haven't had the chance to really meet Lee and spend time with him, but having this interaction over Zoom, I really appreciate him, and I'm hoping he and I can stay in touch and maybe connect in the future, live. I'd love to sit down with him and have some more conversations. Now, listen, if there's something that you want me to follow up on, all these subject matter experts have offered. They've all said, hey, listen, if there are any questions or anything like that, I'll be glad to do that, and I'll probably schedule a future interview. Until then, stay safe.